The stale, recycled air of Northwood High pressed down on Lena like a physical weight, a constant reminder of the invisible lines and unspoken rules that govern their adolescent ecosystem. She walked with her head down, a habitual gesture cultivated over years, her braids swaying gently with each step. The worn linoleum tiles of the hallway, a mosaic of scuffs and faded patterns, stretched before her, a mundane stage for the daily dramas that unfolded. Today, however, the stage was set for something far less mundane. The bell had just rung, a shrill, metallic cry signaling the end of third period, and the hallway was a surging river of adolescent humanity. Laughter, shouts, the rhythmic squeak of sneakers, and the low hum of 1,000 conversations. Lena was heading to her locker, her mind still replaying Mr. Harrison's convoluted explanation of the Pythagorean theorem. Math was a refuge, a world of logic and predictable outcomes, a stark contrast to the volatile unpredictability of her social life. She hugged her textbook closer, a thin shield against the jostling crowd. Up ahead, a knot of students had formed, their voices rising above the general din. At the center of it, as usual, was Marcus. Marcus wasn't just a student. He was a force of nature, a gravitational pull in Northwood's social orbit. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a booming laugh and an easy confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was a star athlete, the undisputed king of the football team, and by extension, the unofficial king of the school. His presence commanded attention, and his pronouncements, whether witty or cruel, were amplified by his entourage, a sycophantic chorus of equally popular, equally self-assured teenagers. Today, his focus was on a smaller, quieter girl, Sarah, who stood with her back pressed against the lockers, her face flushed, her eyes darting nervously around the circle of onlookers. Marcus was jabbing a finger at her, his voice, usually deep and resonant, now edged with sneering condescension that carried easily through the noise. Lena tried to weave her way around the periphery, to become invisible as she always did when Marcus held court, but the hallway bottlenecked, and she found herself caught, an unwilling spectator. She heard snippets of Marcus's taunts, something about Sarah's homework, a perceived slight, a public humiliation designed to assert dominance. Sarah mumbled a soft apology, her voice barely audible, her shoulders slumping. It was clear she just wanted to disappear. Marcus, however, wasn't finished. He leaned in, his face close to hers, a predatory smirk playing on his lips. Then, with a sudden, swift motion, he snatched a small, leather-bound notebook from her hand, holding it high above her head. Sarah gasped, her hands reaching uselessly. "Marcus, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Give it back." A ripple of laughter went through Marcus's group. He just grinned, tossing the notebook from one hand to the other like a toy. "What's in here, little Miss Perfect? Your deepest, darkest secrets." He feigned an exaggerated sniff, drawing more chuckles. Sarah's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. Lena felt a familiar tightening in her stomach, that cold, sick sensation of injustice. She knew that feeling intimately. It was the same feeling she got when she saw her own meticulously researched history project dismissed as too niche by a teacher who lavished praise on a far less original effort from one of Marcus's friends. It was the same feeling that flared when she heard a whispered joke about her hair, or her clothes, or the quiet way she moved through the world. But she always swallowed it down, always looked away. To react was to invite more attention, and attention, for Lena, was often a spotlight on difference, on otherness. But today, something shifted. Maybe it was a raw desperation in Sarah's voice, or the casual cruelty of Marcus's smile, or perhaps it was just the cumulative weight of all the small injustices, real and perceived, that Lena had silently endured. She felt a spark, tiny and rebellious, ignite within her. She took a half step forward, then hesitated. What could she do? She was Lena, the quiet girl, the one who blended into the background. Marcus wouldn't even see her. Just then, as Sarah made a desperate lunge for her notebook, Marcus sidestepped, and his arm, still holding the notebook, swung wide. His elbow connected with Lena's shoulder, with a sickening thud. It wasn't intentional, not directly aimed at her, but it was a consequence of his carelessness, his disregard for anyone outside his immediate sphere. Lena stumbled back, the math textbook clattering to floor. The pain was a sharp, sudden jolt, but was quickly overshadowed by something else. A surge of white-hot anger, a feeling so potent it momentarily stole her breath. The laughter around Marcus died down, replaced by a momentary hush. Marcus, startled, looked at Lena, a flicker of annoyance, then recognition in his eyes. He probably hadn't even registered her presence until that moment. "Watch it, Lena," he said, his tone dismissive, as if she were the one who had caused the incident. He didn't apologize. He didn't even pause. He simply shrugged, then turned back to Sarah, a triumphant grin returning to his face. "Now, where were we?" That was it. That was the moment the dam broke. The pain in her shoulder, the casual disrespect, the humiliation of being an afterthought, a collateral damage in Marcus's petty tyranny. It all converged into a singular, undeniable force. Lena felt a strange calm descend upon her, a clarity that cut through the noise and confusion. It was as if years of silent observation, of watching, learning, and internalizing, had suddenly coalesced into a precise understanding of the forces at play. She wasn't just Lena, the quiet girl, anymore. She was a witness, a victim, and, in that precise instant, a catalyst. She bent down slowly, deliberately, to retrieve her fallen textbook. Her fingers brushed against the cool linoleum. As she straightened, her eyes, usually downcast, met Marcus's. There was no fear in them, no deference, just a quiet, unwavering intensity that surprised even herself. Marcus, caught off guard by her gaze, faltered for a split second. His smile wavered. "Give her back her notebook," Lena said, her voice surprisingly steady, though still soft. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact, a quiet command that cut to the lingering tension in the air. Marcus stared at her, genuinely surprised. "What did you say?" he scoffed, recovering his swagger. "Who even are you?" A few of his friends snickered, emboldened by his dismissive tone. Lena ignored them. Her gaze remained fixed on Marcus. "I said, give her back her notebook." Her voice hadn't risen, but there was an undeniable steel beneath its calm surface. It was the voice of someone who had decided, irrevocably, that this moment would not pass unmarked. Marcus's face hardened. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Lena. He took a step towards her, his imposing height suddenly feeling less like an advantage and more like a clumsy threat. "Or what, little girl? You gonna cry to the principal?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Lena didn't flinch. Her gaze never wavered. She saw the flash of disdain in his eyes, the ingrained belief in his own untouchability. She saw the way his friends were now watching, a mix of amusement and anticipation on their faces. This wasn't just about Sarah's notebook anymore. It was about the established order, about power and its casual exercise. And Lena, without realizing it, had just stepped onto the battlefield. Without a word, she extended her hand. It was a simple gesture, yet in that charged moment, it was an act of defiance. Marcus hesitated, the notebook still clutched in his hand. He looked at her hand, then back at her face, searching for fear he expected to find. When he found none, a flicker of something unreadable, confusion, perhaps even a hint of unease, crossed his features. He was used to easily intimidated girls, to quick capitulations. Lena was not capitulating. "What are you doing?" he said, his voice a little less confident than before. Lena didn't answer. Her hand remained extended, steady as a rock. The silence stretched, amplifying the whispers that had started to ripple through the growing crowd. More students were stopping, drawn by the unusual confrontation. Sarah, wide-eyed, stood frozen, the tears forgotten. Marcus, feeling the weight of all these eyes on him, felt his irritation mount. This quiet girl, this nobody, was challenging him, making him look bad. He needed to put her back in her place. Quickly and definitively. He sneered then with a contemptuous flick of his wrist. He slapped Lena across the face. The sound echoed through the hallway, sharp and sudden. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Lena's head snapped to the side, the force of the blow jarring. A red mark bloomed on her cheek. The pain was immediate, a burning sensation, but it was quickly eclipsed by a profound, chilling clarity. It was done. The line had been crossed. She slowly turned her head back, her eyes meeting Marcus's again. There was no anger there now, not the hot, blinding rage of before. Instead, there was something colder, something infinitely more dangerous. It was a look of someone who had been pushed past their breaking point, not into tears or shouts, but into a calm, resolute determination. Marcus, seeing that look, felt a prickle of unease. The expected reaction, tears, humiliation, retreat, wasn't there. Instead, he saw something entirely new, something he didn't recognize, and it unnerved him. "You shouldn't have done that," Lena said, her voice a low murmur, barely audible over the stunned silence. But everyone heard it. It was not a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the chilling finality of a prophecy. And then she moved. It wasn't a wild, uncontrolled lashing out. It was a fluid, almost graceful motion, born of years of quiet observation and an innate understanding of leverage and balance. Lena had spent countless hours in her grandfather's small, cluttered garage, watching him work, listening to his explanations of how machines moved, how forces interacted. She had learned to mend things, to fix things, to understand the mechanics of the world. And she had absorbed, without conscious effort, the principles of efficient movement, of applied force. Her right hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a precise, almost surgical strike. Her fingers, strong from years of braiding hair and intricate craftwork, hooked around Marcus's wrist, the one still holding Sarah's notebook. In the same motion, she stepped in close, turning her body slightly, using her momentum. She pulled, not just with her arm, but with her entire core, a sudden, sharp twist that caught Marcus completely off guard. He was a large boy, strong and athletic, but he was accustomed to fighting with brute force, with wild swings and unrefined power. He wasn't prepared for a precise, calculated application of leverage. A gasp went through the crowd as Marcus let out a sharp, choked cry of pain. He stumbled forward, off balance, his body twisting awkwardly. Lena didn't release his wrist. Instead, with a follow-through that was shockingly swift, she used his own momentum against him. Her left hand found his shoulder, not pushing, but guiding, turning the natural rotation of his body into an unbearable torsion. There was a sickening, audible crack that reverberated through the now silent hallway. Marcus's eyes widened in shock and agony. The notebook flew from his hand, clattering to the floor. He roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain, and stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder with his other hand, his face contorted. His knees buckled, and he sank to the ground whimpering. The swagger, the arrogance, the unassailable confidence, it had all vanished in an instant, replaced by raw, primitive suffering. The hallway erupted. Shouts, gasps, the horrified murmurs of 100 stunned students. Sarah, still frozen, watched with wide, disbelieving eyes. Marcus's friends, usually so quick to defend him, stood speechless, their faces pale. They had never seen anything like it. They had never seen Marcus, their untouchable leader, brought down, not by another hulking athlete, but by Lena, the quiet girl, with a single, devastatingly precise move. Lena stood over him, her chest heaving slightly, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The red mark on her cheek burned, but the pain was distant, absorbed by the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her eyes, still blazing with that cold, resolute fire, looked down at Marcus, who was now writhing on the floor, groaning in agony. There was no triumph in her gaze, no satisfaction, just a profound, almost weary understanding. She hadn't sought this confrontation, but when it came, she had met it head on. Then, the piercing wail of a distant siren cut through the air, drawing closer. It was the unmistakable sound of authority, of consequences. Moments later, Mr. Henderson, the stern, perpetually stressed principal of Northwood High, burst into the hallway, his face flushed, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene. Behind him, Mrs. Jenkins, the school counselor, followed, her usually calm demeanor replaced by an expression of alarm. Mr. Henderson saw Marcus on the floor, heard his cries, and his eyes immediately narrowed on Lena, who stood tall amidst the disarray. His gaze was accusatory, already forming a narrative in his mind. He didn't ask what happened. He assumed. He had seen this kind of thing before, or so he believed. A fight, a physical altercation. And usually it was a problem students, the ones who didn't fit neatly into the school's carefully constructed image, who were at fault. Lena, quiet, reserved, but from a less affluent part of town, with a scholarship that barely covered her books, fit that stereotype in his prejudiced mind. Lena, what in the world do you think you're doing? His voice boomed, cutting through the stunned silence. He rushed over to Marcus, kneeling beside him, his expression a mass of concern. Marcus, are you all right? What happened? Marcus, still clutching his shoulder, gasped out, She attacked me. She broke my arm. His words were slurred with pain, but clear enough to paint a picture of unprovoked aggression. Mr. Henderson's jaw tightened. He stood up, turning his full, imposing presence towards Lena. Is this true, Lena? Did you assault Marcus? Lena looked from Mr. Henderson's angry face to Marcus's pained, accusatory eyes. She saw the implicit bias, the immediate judgment. She saw how quickly the narrative was being shaped, how easily her quiet nature could be twisted into something sinister, her self-defense into an attack. But she didn't flinch. She simply met his gaze, her own eyes steady. He slapped me first, sir, she said, her voice calm, devoid of any emotional charge, though the faint redness on her cheek was a silent testament to her words. And he wouldn't give Sarah back her notebook. Mr. Henderson scoffed. Slapped you? Marcus. He looked at Marcus, who was still groaning. Marcus, did you slap Lena? Marcus, though clearly in pain, managed to shake his head emphatically. No, sir. She just came out of nowhere. She just attacked me. His friends, now recovering from their shock, quickly corroborated his story with nervous nods and mumbled agreements. Yeah, she just went crazy. Totally unprovoked. Mr. Henderson looked back at Lena, his expression hardening. Lena, you heard him. And his friends. You assaulted a fellow student, a star athlete, and now you're trying to lie about it? This is serious. You could be expelled. His words hung in the air, heavy with threat. Mrs. Jenkins, however, had moved closer to Sarah, who was still trembling. Sarah, she said gently, what did you see? Sarah, tears now streaming down her face, looked from Lena to Marcus, then to Mr. Henderson. The weight of expectation, the fear of contradicting the popular narrative, was palpable. She was a quiet girl herself, easily intimidated. Her silence was a testament to the oppressive atmosphere of fear and conformity that Marcus had cultivated. But then she looked at Lena, at the calm, unwavering strength in her eyes, and something shifted within her. Lena had stood up for her. She couldn't betray that. Marcus took my notebook, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. And then he hit Lena. Mr. Henderson's head snapped toward Sarah. Sarah, are you sure? Are you absolutely certain you saw Marcus hit Lena? His tone was sharp, laced with an implicit warning against contradicting the established order. Sarah nodded, tears flowing freely now. Yes, sir. He slapped her. She pointed a shaky finger at Lena's still red cheek. Right there. A murmur went through the crowd. Some students started whispering, confirming Sarah's account. They had seen it too, but had been too afraid to speak up. Now, with Sarah breaking the silence, a few more found their voices, hesitant at first, then growing louder. She's right, Mr. Henderson. Marcus totally slapped her. Yeah, he took Sarah's book first. Mr. Henderson's face, which had been set in an expression of rigid certainty, now wavered. The narrative he had so quickly constructed was crumbling. He looked from the growing number of confirming voices to Lena, then back to Marcus, whose face was now a mixture of pain and panic realization. The arrival of the paramedics, their stretcher now navigating the crowded hallway, added another layer of urgency and chaos. We need to get Marcus to the infirmary, then to the hospital, one of the paramedics said, gently examining his shoulder. Looks like a dislocated shoulder, possibly a fracture. Someone needs to call his parents. The weight of the situation suddenly pressed down on Mr. Henderson. A dislocated shoulder. an assault claim, a potential lawsuit, and now, conflicting testimonies. His carefully managed world was rapidly spinning out of control. He knew he couldn't just dismiss Lena's claim, not with so many witnesses. And he certainly couldn't ignore Marcus's injury. This was going to be a massive headache. In the ensuing chaos, Lena was led away by Mrs. Jenkins to a quiet room in the counseling office. Mrs. Jenkins, a woman of profound empathy and quiet wisdom, looked at Lena with a mixture of concern and a dawning understanding. She had always seen Lena as a strong, intelligent girl, but also deeply reserved. This outburst, while shocking, hinted at depth she hadn't fully appreciated. "Lena," Mrs. Jenkins said softly, after the door was closed and the noise of the hallway faded to a dull thrum. "Are you all right? That was quite a scene." Lena nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "I'm fine, Mrs. Jenkins." Her voice was still calm, but a tremor of exhaustion now ran through it. The adrenaline was starting to recede, leaving her feeling hollowed out. "He shouldn't have hit me." Mrs. Jenkins sat beside her, offering a warm, reassuring smile. "No, he shouldn't have. And I believe you, Lena." She paused, her gaze thoughtful. "But what happened? How did you manage to do that?" She gestured vaguely toward the door, implicitly referring to Marcus's injury. Lena hesitated, then looked at her hands. Strong and capable, yet so often overlooked. "My grandfather, he used to teach me about how things move, how leverage works. He builds things, fixes things. He always said, 'It's not about brute force, Lena. It's about knowing where to push, how to turn.'" She looked up, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her voice. I just reacted. He was hurting Sarah, and then he hit me. It just clicked." Mrs. Jenkins nodded slowly, a dawning understanding replacing her initial surprise. "So, you didn't just snap, Lena. You used what you knew. You defended yourself, and you stood up for someone else." She reached out, gently touching Lena's unblemished arm. "That takes incredible courage, Lena. Incredible strength. Not just physical, but moral." The following days at Northwood High were a maelstrom of whispered rumors, official inquiries, and an unsettling shift in the social landscape. Marcus, his arm in a sling, was a diminished figure, his usual boisterous confidence replaced by a surly resentment. His friends, no longer basking in his reflected glory, kept their distance, their loyalty proving as superficial as his. Popularity. The incident had exposed the fragility of their power structure, built on fear and intimidation. Lena, on the other hand, found herself in an unfamiliar spotlight. No longer invisible, she was now the subject of intense scrutiny, a figure of both fear and reluctant admiration. Some students, the ones who had silently resented Marcus's bullying, looked at her with newfound respect. Others, those who thrived on the established hierarchy, viewed her with suspicion, even hostility. But no one, absolutely no one, looked at her with indifference anymore. Mr. Henderson, under pressure from both Marcus's well-connected parents and the growing number of student testimonies, found himself in an unenviable position. His initial inclination to dismiss Lena's account and punish her severely was now impossible. The school board, alerted to the incident, demanded a thorough and impartial investigation. The truth, messy and inconvenient, was slowly but undeniably emerging. The investigation revealed a pattern of bullying from Marcus, corroborated by numerous students who had previously been too scared to speak up. Sarah, emboldened by Lena's actions, provided a detailed account of Marcus's consistent harassment, not just of her, but of other quieter students. The surveillance footage from the hallway, though grainy, clearly showed Marcus slapping Lena moments before her swift, decisive countermove. It wasn't an unprovoked attack. It was self-defense, a reaction to an act of aggression. The principal, a man who prided himself on maintaining order and upholding the school's reputation, was forced to confront his own biases, his own quick judgments. He had consistently favored the popular, athletic students, often overlooking their transgressions, while quick to penalize those who didn't fit his ideal. Lena, The quiet, scholarly black girl from a working-class background had been unfairly judged by him, labeled and dismissed before she even had a chance to speak. The irony was not lost on Mrs. Jenkins, who watched the principal's uncomfortable reckoning with a quiet, knowing gaze. In the end, the consequences were stark. Marcus, facing mounting evidence of his bullying and his unprovoked assault on Lena, was suspended for the remainder of the semester and stripped of his captaincy of the football team. His prestigious college scholarship, once a certainty, was now in jeopardy. His parents, initially outraged and demanding Lena's expulsion, were forced to acknowledge their son's culpability as the truth became undeniable. The comfortable bubble of privilege and impunity that had always protected Marcus had finally burst. Lena, though cleared of any wrongdoing, still faced a disciplinary hearing, a formality given the clear evidence. But at that hearing, something unexpected happened. Mr. Henderson, his face grim but sincere, publicly apologized to Lena. He admitted his initial misjudgment, his failure to listen, and his implicit bias. It was a humbling moment for Principal, a crack in his rigid facade, but it was also a powerful acknowledgement of Lena's truth. "Lena," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it, "I was wrong. I apologize for not believing you, for jumping to conclusions. You acted in self-defense, and you displayed immense courage. Northwood High owes you an apology." The apology, delivered in a quiet, solemn tone, echoed through the small conference room. Lena, sitting across from him, felt a strange mix of emotions. It wasn't triumph, not really. It was more like a heavy burden being lifted, a quiet vindication. The invisible lines, the unspoken rules had been challenged, and for once, justice had prevailed. After the hearing, Lena walked out into the crisp autumn air. The school seemed different, lighter somehow. Sarah was waiting for her, a small, shy smile on her face. She handed Lena a carefully wrapped package. Inside, nestled among tissue paper, was a brand-new, leather-bound notebook, identical to the one Marcus had destroyed. "Thank you, Lena," Sarah whispered, her eyes shining with gratitude. "For everything." Lena smiled, a genuine, unreserved smile that lit up her face. "You're welcome, Sarah." They walked together, side by side, out of the school grounds. The whispers still followed Lena, but they were different now. They carried less judgment, more curiosity, more respect. She wasn't just a quiet girl anymore. She was Lena, the girl who had stood up for herself, who had challenged the system, and who, with a single precise move, had brought down a tyrant. The incident at Northwood High became a legend, whispered in the hallways for years to come. It was a story of a quiet girl, underestimated and overlooked, who found her voice and her power in the face of injustice. It was a story of a flawed authority figure forced to confront his own biases, and, in doing so, offered a glimmer of redemption. And it was a story that resonated far beyond the school walls, a powerful testament to the idea that true strength isn't always loud or obvious, but can reside in the most unexpected places, waiting for the right moment to emerge. In the intricate tapestry of life, there are moments when the threads of injustice become so tightly woven, so suffocating, that they demand to be broken. This was one such moment. Lena's story is a vivid reminder that the meek are not always weak, and that privilege, left unchecked, can crumble under the weight of truth. Her actions echo a profound truth, that standing up for oneself and for others is not merely an act of defiance, but a profound assertion of dignity and worth. It teaches us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it, a quiet strength that can reshape narratives, dismantle hierarchies, and ultimately carve a path towards a more just and equitable world. And it reminds us that true power lies not in the ability to oppress, but in the unwavering spirit of those who refuse to be silenced. If you believe in the power of truth to prevail against privilege, then join us on this journey. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore more stories where the underdog rises and justice finds its way.